We're continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Siman, Kuf Mem Aleph, on Daf Chaf Gimel Amud Bet of the regular principle Mishnah Berura. We're starting Sif Bet of Shulchan Aruch in Hilchot Kriyat Sefer Torah, and this is based on often a Gemara in Masechet Megillah Daf Chaf Aleph. Shulchan Aruch writes, Lo yikru shenayim ela ole koreh shliach tzibur shotek. There is a concept that the Gemara introduces. Tere kali lo mishtami. The Gemara there in Megillah says, when you have two voices, it's not really heard, unless, again, there are exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, you cannot really hear two voices at the same time, and hence, by Kriyat Torah, if you have a chazan, a Baal Koreh that's reading the psukim, and the one getting an aliyah is repeating after him, he can't be saying it out loud together, because then it's very confusing. So what happens is, says the Shulchan Aruch, they should not read it together, but the ole, the one that gets the aliyah, reads, and shaliach tzibur keeps quiet. Well, now this is the other way around, right? Because normally speaking, the one getting the aliyah does not necessarily know the trops and the psukim properly, so he kind of like listens quietly, and the Baal Koreh is the one that's reading, or shaliach, which is the case of Shulchan Aruch right after, or shaliach tzibur koreh ve'haoleh lo yikra b'kol ram, or that the shaliach tzibur is going to read out loud, and the one with the aliyah that says the bracha is not going to read it out loud. Now, Shulchan Aruch is very careful to not say that the ole does not read, because of course he has to read. It's his portion of the Torah, and he certainly has to read it. But he can't read it b'kol ram. He can't read it with a loud voice, because that would create this concept of terei kali lo mishtami, would be bad. Umikol makom sarich hu likrot im shaliach tzibur. Of course, says the Shulchan Aruch, he has to read together with the shaliach tzibur, because otherwise, what did he do? He has to read his aliyah. He made a bracha on the aliyah, in order that his bracha that he made, should not be in vain. So he has to say the bracha and read together with the shaliach tzibur. He just is going to lip it and say it very quietly, listening to shaliach tzibur, and shaliach tzibur is the only one that's going to read it out loud. It should not be in a way that you could hear his voice, because then it would be very confusing. Says the Ramah, Ramah says even if he himself could hear himself, it's still fine as long as the Baal Koreh does not hear him, as long as nobody else hears him. Says the Mishnah Berura, he introduces this concept that, again, the Gemara in Megillah Chaf Aleph teaches us, the terei kali lo mishtami, and explains Mishnah Berura, minhagenu achshav sheleolam hashliach tzibur koreh afilu kshaoleh hu baki. Nowadays the minhag is, this is something to be mindful of, even though that the one getting the aliyah is proficient, is a baki in reading the aliyah that he gets, our minhag is, says the Chafetz Chaim, we don't let anyone read. The shaliach tzibur, who is appointed, he is the one that reads, and the one getting the aliyah reads quietly with him, and not out loud, in order not to embarrass the person that doesn't know how to read. Because imagine a shul in which everyone gets an aliyah, and it's a display of world-class chazanut, and then there's this guy that comes up, and he doesn't know how to read, and shaliach tzibur, someone else has to come read for the backbacht guy, and he's embarrassed. This really is not something that we created over here. The reason that the chuppah and kiddushin is done by a mesader kiddushin, right? Someone that officiates the kiddushin. Why do you have to have an officiator for kiddushin? Aside from the halachot that some people may not know, but it's a fairly simple process, and the bracha of erusin is really the bracha of the chatan himself. It's questionable if it's birkat Shevach or Birkat HaMitzvah, but certainly if it's a Birkat HaMitzvah, like the Rambam writes, it will be a bracha that he must be saying, just like you say bracha on any mitzvah that you do, right? שעשה לנו את הארוסות והטיל לנו את הנשואות לנו, בקידושין. So why do we not let the Hatan say it? And the reason is because if someone can't say it, then it's going to be embarrassing. So we say it for them. They'll have in mind. And they'll be yotzeh. Right? Especially if it's because of Shevach, it's easier. But therefore, we are always mindful to make sure that in public presentations, we very much care about the emotions and the dignity of the person that is being called up now, being put in the light, in a spotlight. Over there is the Chatan, over here is the guy that's getting the Aliyah. Poor guy gets Aliyah, gets up there, is all embarrassed, come down, is red and white and purple and black and embarrassed. Of course, that is, by the way, embarrassing somebody in public is a severe. According to Tosafot in Masechet Sotah Daf Yud, it's literally, not figuratively, but literally included in those things that are Yaharek Val Yavor, they should be willing to give your life up not doing it. According to other Rishonim, maybe it's homiletic, but according to Tosafot is quite literal. So that's the minhag of the Ashkenazim, says the Chafetz Chaim. And Kaf HaChaim conquers the same way. Kaf HaChaim says it's not the Ashkenazi Sephardi thing, we do the same thing. We also let the Shaliach Tzibur read it, even if the person that's getting Aliyah, he is quite capable of reading the Torah. But he brings other places that their minhag is that the people who get up to the Torah, they read their own Aliyah. He brings we're aware of the fact that there are some communities who are noheg like that, but says the Kaf HaChaim that their minhag, and he holds that it will be the correct thing to do, to let the Shaliach Tzibur handle that and not let the profession person that gets up there to read. Now, if you have a place that the minhag is to let the people read themselves, you let the minhag go. It's fine. It's not something that you have to fight. But again, the better minhag would be let the Shaliach Tzibur do his job and not embarrass anyone that doesn't know. Vegam yimatzu harbe shen yudin betov likrot, and says the Chafetz Chaim, it's an additional problem also. Some people, it's the worst. Some people think they know how to read, and they'll say, "I'm gonna do it," and then they completely botch the Kriyat Torah, but with mistakes in not just the drops of the Ta'amim, but mistakes in the words. Sometimes, again, little details would change the meaning even. Like, upcoming, we have Megillat Esther, we have the same thing in the beginning, rispat or risafat, right? Many people will read rispat, but rispat means a hot coal. Risafat means the floor of, the pavement of, right? So you could see how very easily, or ba'a versus ba'a, the verbiage is completely different. Ba'a means she is coming. Ba'a means she came already. And you could have those two in the same paragraph in the Torah, by Rachel coming. And if you make a mistake, so then you change the whole meaning, and your Kriyat Torah was pasul. So therefore, let the professionals do their job, says the Chafetz Chaim, and not people who don't necessarily know the details of diktuk and proper Kriyat Torah. That's a second reason that he mentions as well. The yirtzu likrot, they would want to read, and then you have to allow them, if their minhag is to allow people, v'atzibur en yotzin b'kriyatan, and then you won't be yotzei kriyat Torah. And then if you stop them, so you could, but you can't, and then the guy's going to start fighting and make, erupting the whole machloket in the community. It's not. So therefore, by area of Kriyat Torah, you have a lot of things that are, across the board. We don't differentiate. We just do it one way in order to save the community from potential machloket, and also to ensure that there's proper Kriyat Torah offered to the tzibur. Now, he has to still read with the Shaliach Tzibur, as we mentioned. which means he has to look at the ktav, not just close his eyes and say after him. You have to actually look at the ktav, reading from the ktav. He's just assisting you reading it properly, but really you should be reading it from the ktav, as we already have discussed in previous ifim in Shulchan Aruch. And the Kaf HaChaim says that the person getting the aliyah should be very makpid, should be very specific to read properly, not to just mumble after the Baal Koreh saying, oh, the Shach is reading it properly, so what a hazanut, and I'm just going to mumble after him. No, you have to read it actually properly, just like the Shach Sibur does, with all the diktukim, with all the sof pasuk and the ta'amim and so on, just like the Shach Sibur has to be done. Because don't forget, at the end of the day, after everything said and done, it's your aliyah that you should be reading. So we do it the way we do it because of the reasons we discussed, but at the end of the day, you have to be saying it properly. So even though that you're whispering it, you're saying it to yourself, you're not loud, but you should be reading it properly with all the proper ta'amim and diktukim that it's supposed to have. Says the Mishna Berura that if you don't read it with the Shayach Tzibur, it will be bracha batala. That's why you have to read it, because you're the one saying the bracha. Because it doesn't make any sense that I'm going to say the bracha, he's going to read. If I'm saying the bracha, that means it's my aliyah, I have to read it. Therefore, the person should be following along, reading quietly with the Baal Koreh, with the Shaliach Tzibur, even though that according to Maran Shulchan Aruch, someone that gets the aliyah and he does not read with the Shaliach Tzibur, it seems over here that there will be bracha batala. From the language of the Shulchan Aruch over here in Siman Kuf Mem Aleph, seems that Maran would hold that if you don't read it, your bracha was a bracha in vain. But there are those who write that they asked Chacham Obadiah about this specific case, that if you have in Bet Knesset somebody that is getting an aliyah, and he does not read with Shaliach Tzibur. We discussed this briefly before. It happens many times. You pay attention to a regular Kriyat Torah, especially if you have people who are not very well versed in halacha. They come, every day, once a year to shul, and they get an aliyah. So many times they don't necessarily know how to read properly. And says, is that considered that they are saying bracha batara? Should we stop them from doing that? Haravadia says, is said to have held that you could still answer Amen after those brachot. They're not considered bracha batala. It's fine. It's fine. Even though that according to the diktuk of this language of Maran over here, it seems like it will be bracha batala. There is room to be mekel held Chacham Obadiah alav shalom. So says the Mishnah Berura, Shlo yashmiya lo'oznav. The Rama says that as long as you don't hear it yourself, or that's Shulchan Aruch, or according to Rama, that you could even hear it yourself, but not other people. Even though the Rama agrees that's better, that you shouldn't even hear it, you're just lipping it, saying it. Now, if you say it in your mind, that's not saying it. That's not Kriya. You have to lip it at the very least. So you're saying the words in actuality with moving your lips, like the Gemara in 5th parak of Brachot learns from Chana. But Rama says even if you heard it yourself is fine. So he agrees with Maran that l'chatchila you should not be hearing it yourself. But if you did, he says it's not the end of the world, and it's not less than tefillah that also it has to be belachash. But if you hear your voice, is still a proper thing, as we discussed earlier on in Siman Kuf Aleph in Hilchot Tefillah. And says the Kaf HaChaim that the Rama is not aligned with the Shulchan Aruch, even though that he makes it sound like it is lav davka, but really this is machloket between Shulchan Aruch and the Rama. According to Shulchan Aruch, it would not be mutar for him to read it in a way that he hears it himself, because Terek Halilo Mishtami is mainly mentioned for himself as well as other people in the shul. So therefore, he should not be hearing his own voice, according to Maran of Shulchan Aruch. And says the Kaf HaChaim, the Ikar is like of course, like Maran Shcharuch, they should not be hearing yourself. It's asur for him to do such a thing. You should just say it so quietly that you can't even hear it yourself, and that will be the Ikar Adin, according to Maran of Shulchan Aruch. Says the Shcharuch in Sif Dalet. Sif Dalet, אם שליח ציבור רוצה לברך לעצמו ולקרות, צריך שיעמוד אחר אצלו. This is based on a psak from Yerushalmi, the Maran brings in Bet Yosef, that we simulate by every Kriyat Torah the Matan Torah from Har Sinai, right? Every time that you bring the Torah, you put it on the Bima, it's like the Torah that was given on top of Har Sinai. So the Bima becomes like Har Sinai, right? The Bar Koreh, and the person that takes gets the Aliyah is like HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael, giving of the Torah, receiving of the Torah, and Moshe Rabbeinu would be the Sagan. So therefore you find out that the communities are machmir to have the minimum of 3 people up there at every given point of time. Why is that? The reason is because you need someone to represent, homiletically, of course, simulate that scene, someone representing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's the giver of the Torah, someone simulating Klal Yisrael, who's receiving the Torah, and someone simulating Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the intermediary, the sarsur in between them. That's the Yerushalmi that is brought in the Rif, really, but Yosef brings it from the Rif, in the name of the Yerushalmi in Masechet Megillah, Perek Dalit, in the beginning of Perek Dalit, Halakha Aleph, says the Shulchan Aruch, im shaliach tzibur rotze levarech la'atzmo, if the shaliach tzibur wants to say the bracha for himself, velikrot, and to read, so now you're knocking down one of the 3, right? So he is the one that is saying the bracha, and he's the one that's reading. You should have one more person standing next to him. Just like he was given through an intermediary, here also you want at least another person to be standing over there, representing that intermediary between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe Rabbeinu. Says the Mishna Berura, that is Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom, dichtiv, Anochi omed ben Hashem ubenechem. I was standing between you and between HaKadosh Baruch Hu, linhog bali de sarsur, to do it, to simulate that relationship. Says the Mishna Berura, noagin shagabai o hakoneh hamitzvot omed etzel sefer Torah v'zeh nikra segan. The minhag is you have another person, either the gabai or the person that used to buy the aliyot for that week. They used to have one person buying all the aliyot of the week, and he would just give them out, right? So that would be considered the person for that week that was dealing with the aliyot of the Sefer Torah. So they would stand next to the bima, and his name would be Sagan. Kadeshi yesh shlosha, in order that it should be 3 people, as we just mentioned before. Hainu Sagan hu kivyachol bimkom Hashem. The Sagan is representing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Shehu metzaveh likrot, because he's the one that tells people who's got to read, who's got to get the aliyah. Lechol mi sheyirtze, anyone that he wants. Va'koreh hu asarsur, and the one that reads the Torah is the intermediary that is facilitating the giving of the Torah. Ve'ha'oleh hu ha'mekabel, and the one that gets the aliyah is the Klal Yisrael that's receiving the Torah, b'mkom kol Yisrael u'b'shlichutam, in place of all of Klal Yisrael and with their agency. And this is brought already in the Levush. Rabbi Mordechai Yafe brings this. U'be'emet, says the Mishnah Berura, you think this is a new thing? No. Zeu minhag hakadmonim. This is a very old, long-standing minhag, as it is mentioned, שיהיו 3 עומדים אצל ספר תורה, כמו שכתוב במסכת סופרים. This is already from מסכת סופרים, פרק י"ד, הלכה י"ד, so easy to remember. Yad leyad, Yud Dalet, Yud Dalet, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Torah, Mimino Eshtad Lamo. This is in Masechet Sofrim. Vehuvaze be'or zarua, it's brought already in the early Rishonim as well, in Or Zarua, Elchot Shabbat. Rashesham, Ita Tam Acher Laze. There, in Or Zarua, it's brought a different reason for it, and we quote the language over here in Mishnah Berura. Eino v'zeh shalom. Eino mina muvchar she'amot chazan yechidi lifnei ateva. It's not proper that the Shliach Tzibur should be standing by the bima alone. It's not right. He should have two people, one on his right hand, one on his left hand. Keneged ha'avot, corresponding to the avot, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So we mentioned from Yerushalmi, from Masechet Sofrim, that it is simulating the Matan Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Klal Yisrael. Says it's avot, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and therefore you should have three people over there. Now, can you stand somebody that doesn't hear and can't talk, a cheresh, right? That's considered not a developed mind because he can't talk and he cannot hear, so his mind would never develop really. But he's a person, he's a living, breathing human being. So Rabbi Avraham Palaji, the son of Rabbi Chaim Palaji, he is mistapek. He's not sure about this, if it works or not, because even though that he doesn't hear and he doesn't understand, at the end of the day, he's considered like a shoteh, he's like a crazy person, but maybe standing him there is just derech remez. Maybe it doesn't have to be a smart person. It's just you want to simulate the situation, therefore you could stand him there or not. So it's not so clear if you could have someone like that. Nowadays you don't have necessarily that many of cheresh shomeh v'no medaber, but you have schizophrenic people, you have people who are not developed, do not have developed mind, or if you want to put katan, which would be the same halacha as cheresh shoteh v'katan, so that would be the relevance of the psak of, or the safek of Rabbi Avraham Palaji. So we mentioned that the Sagan stands there to be the third person representing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Kaf HaChaim writes, Mikar Adin, you don't have to stand three people there, so you don't have to rush and drop what you're doing and run there to stand to make sure there are three people. And it's sufficient if you have two people there. You have the Shliach Tzibur, you have the person that is getting the Aliyah, but it's mitzvah mina muvchar, says the Kaf HaChaim, you should have three, and that's the minhag of Yerushalayim, and that has been our minhag, a clear minhag. I remember it already from back east in different cities of Iran. That was the minhag, that they were extremely careful to always have at all times three people by in the bima, again simulating this situation. Now, according to Ikar Adin that we mentioned, that two people are sufficient to stand by the Torah, the Kaf HaChaim explains that the person that gets the aliyah is the one that's accepting the Torah instead of Klal Yisrael, and Shliach Tzibur becomes instead of Moshe Rabbeinu, who gave the Torah, who was the Sarsur, the one in between Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Torah itself is Me'et Hashem min hashamayim, right? Yisrael ve'oraita ve'kudshabir chochatu, like the Zohar HaKadosh says. So the Torah itself speaks for itself. That's the living testament of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's chokhmah being related to us. So therefore, says the Kaf HaChaim, two people mikar adin would be sufficient, because the third one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is really the Torah itself. And the way they stand, it says three people stand, that we brought from the Or Zarua, that they should have three people, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The Kaf HaChaim explains this also. He brings this Or Zarua, and he explains that the person that gets an aliyah of the Torah, he should be standing on the right side of the Shliach Tzibur, which is what everyone does, right? And the this Chazan, the Gabbai, the Sagan, would stand in the left side of the Shach Tzibur. So you would have it, the one that's reading the Torah in the middle, the one that gets Aliyah on the right side, and the Sagan would be to the left side, and that's the order that you would have. He brings from Sha'arei Ephraim, the Mishna Berura, Katab B'Sefer Sha'arei Ephraim, מזה יש ללמוד שיש לבחור סגן איש נכבד ובעל מעשים טובים. Don't just choose anybody to be the Gabbai or the Sagan, because he is representing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He becomes, in some sense, the most important one over here, and therefore you should choose someone that is respectable, and is Baal Maasim Tovim, and that Berura Nochaimen, people like him, he's well liked, he's well behaved, so to speak, and שלא יחשדו שבשביל הנעת עצמו או איזה סיבה יתמוך כבוד למי שאינו ראוי או בהיפוך. So therefore these are sensitivities that again the Gabbaim have to have, the Rabbanim of the what the Knesset should have. My personal feeling is that these things have become much more watered down nowadays. People don't look at it in the same way, but again conceptually it's still important to be very mindful of these concepts. Now אם ערה, ואף אם קרה שקרא לאחד שלא לפי כבודו, וחושד לסגן שעשה במתכוון להכיסו. Even if it happened that the Sagan called up a person that's not לפי כבודו, and now people are upset, maybe he's calling only the rich people or only his friends. Again, this is one of the reasons that in the Sephardi communities they just sell all that. They save a lot of trouble by not causing any opportunity of chashad to exist in the community. Again, in that case, that the person suspects the Sagan to have done something deliberately to bother him, אם נגע יראת השם בלבבו, יש לו להתאפק. You shouldn't say something. People in the shul should have seichel, should not go around making machloket about, oh, this guy got shlishi, I got this guy got shishi, I got mashlim or got haftara. These are not big deals. There was Khatam Sofer, famous story of the Khatam Sofer, and maybe we'll end with this, we'll see. The Khatam Sofer was asked about, this is of course in the Ashkenazi community, of people wanting to say, be the Shaliach Tzibur and be the one that says the Kaddish, because two people had yortzites, or one of them had a chiyuv within the Shana, and the other one had the yortzeit. And there was a machloket, who's got to get it? And Khatam Sofer said something so smart, so powerful. He said, whoever gives in first and lets the other person do it, that act of giving in and proper conduct of a yid, of a Baal Midot, of a person with proper character traits, that's a greater zchut and a greater aliyat neshama for the niftar than winning, so to speak, and getting the kaddish or getting the amud to be the shaliach tzibur. And that sometimes is very much the case over here also. You think getting an aliyah is the kavod for the Torah. The greatest kavod for the Torah is that you should be a living, walking Sefer Torah with proper midot and so on. A person should, have this logical discourse in his mind. If somebody touches your kavod a little bit and you get so upset, how much more so you should be careful about the kavod of Hashem, the kavod of His Torah, kavod of the Bet Knesset, not to create machloket, a fight in makom kadosh, in front of the Torah. Not to make a big deal out of it. Let things pass, let things go. He writes over here, the Chafetz Chaim, a person that's willing to give up and forgo and forgive and forget. HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgets and forgives all of his pshaim. This is a comment from the Gemara. And if somebody did make a fuss and started yelling and screaming because he felt disrespected, with the Sagan, the Sagan, the Gabbai, should be, from those who hear his disgrace and not say anything. Like the Gemara says in Gitin Daf Lamed Vav, if you hear disgrace and you don't, You are from the closest people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ahavav kiset Hashem eshbik v'rato, says the Gemara, right? And of course, everyone that sees that should line up afterwards to get the bracha from the Sagan, for the zchut that he has is unmatched with any other zchuyot. You shouldn't have to respond. Let it pass, and that's the words of wisdom that Chavetz Chaim says at the end of Sif Dalet over here in Siman Kuf Mem Aleph. Bezrat Hashem will continue this in the days to come. Hazaku Baruch.